Moy Sarkar. Just to give my quick background, I am a graduate research assistant actually at Iowa State University and working with Dr. Christina Polakowski. And I'm also, my another introduction is I'm also a senior water resources engineer at Jacobs Engineering Group. So basically the paper I work is basically one of my PhD, like a conference paper, but ultimately it's going to be a journal. Basically we are working on that and making it to a journal. So, but some results I probably show from my journal. I mean, some results I will actually show from the publication, which we are aiming to. So that's the thing. So the main authors, as me and Dr. Christina Polakowski, is basically working on that the name of the paper is like Socioeconomic and Housing Vulnerabilities Role in Decision Time for Reconstruction in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. So basically we are trying to figure out what's going on actually after Hurricane Maria. What's the social and housing vulnerability impacting the reconstruction process and everything. So that's what we are actually figuring out. So before I begin, EPA is actually funding us for this project, and I'm a part of that project with Dr. Garcia, Dr. Carl Williams, Dr. Ikuma, and Dr. Rahman. And and this is a collaborative project with Iowa State University, University of Utah, and EPA. So, and I put the paper information also there if you need to refer to that paper sometimes. I mean, or I don't know, Dr. Garcia is going to share this presentation or not. I mean, the paper is actually there. So just to begin actually, so what happened actually in Puerto Rico, right? So Puerto Rico in September 6 and September 20, back in 2007, there is a back-to-back two hurricanes, right? So both of the hurricanes are like category 5 and category 4. And it actually impacted like 60% of the housing in Puerto Rico. So meaning housing stock actually being affected in Puerto Rico. And it's basically, it's a huge issue because there are a lot of people there who doesn't have any kind of housing or anything, and Puerto Rico, as long as it's a U.S. territory, that's become an issue actually after Hurricane Maria. Then, so basically, what I'm trying to say at this moment is like, what is the theory basically behind the socioeconomic vulnerabilities actually there because of the impact? What are the theories behind it? But I think this slide actually goes very fast. Okay. Yeah, it actually goes very fast because there is something issues with that. So after that 60%, actually that thing, 15% is actually rebuilt after that hurricane, and only 15% is basically rebuilt, and people doesn't have actually didn't get enough from FEMA or any kind of support actually after the Hurricane Irma event or Hurricane Maria event. And the 90% people actually kind of applied for the financial assistance, but only 40% of them actually get the financial assistance. So that's a huge actually a problem. That's actually a huge problem in Puerto Rico. That is because most of the people, they have some issues with their like income. The people doesn't have enough money, and the typical socioeconomic condition in Puerto Rico is basically kind of not that up to the mark compared to the main US territory. So basically that become a huge issue at this moment. So based on that, so we actually conceptualized the socioeconomic vulnerability theory actually, and to see that is what's going on in actually Puerto Rico. So so the socioeconomic vulnerability theory is basically saying that is after I mean, after a natural disaster, these kind of thing is basically aggravates more, and it's actually impacting the households, and it's actually impacting all the things after a disaster events, right? And most of the indicators are actually age, race, gender, nationality, highest level of education, annual income, disabilities, and numbers of people who are actually so what is actually happening in Puerto Rico? So basically they have high poverty rates. They have long-term migration actually happening after Hurricane Maria and after 2017. And there is a history because Puerto Rico was a part of Spain before, right? And then US actually owned it. So basically there is a complicated history between the mainland USA and the federal government. And it's basically in a very separate island, so that it's basically a lot of mountainous area, which is very much inaccessible most of the cases. So that become a huge problem for the Puerto Ricans. So so basically another problem in Puerto Rico is basically the problem is basically they don't have a informal, they don't have a housing system which is not very much formal, which means they don't have any kind of like a land title, meaning so they don't have any so whenever it's mostly its cases actually an informal housing type of stuff. So meaning they don't have any kind of like a land title, they don't have any kind of engineers who can actually take care of the like any kind of reconstruction work. And they don't, I mean, most of the cases we actually see that they don't follow the building codes, and they typically doesn't have any kind of construction permits. So these informal housing system is basically another indicator which is actually impacting Puerto Rico a lot. So why these things are coming? So after 2017, when Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Irma happened, right? So FEMA came up, and FEMA actually want to give them some grant. So the major problem is that like FEMA has a formal procedure. So meaning if they have a property title and if they have a prior insurance, they actually see that is who are eligible or who are not. So because of the informal housing in Puerto Rico, people doesn't have that kind of actually a property title in hand, which they don't give. Like when they fill up the application, when they do something, they don't have something in their hand. So which actually creates a huge and enormous problem when FEMA is trying to issue some kind of individual grant or hood program grant or any kind of grant to the people to the Puerto Rican. So these housing indicators, what we find from the literature as well as in the media, which kind of aggravates the reconstruction processes in Puerto Rico. So what we are trying to do, we are actually trying to see, is there any kind of interrelation between the reconstruction parameters and as well as the socioeconomic parameters and as well as the housing parameters, right? So for our case, we actually to understand that we did a couple of surveys actually in Loiza, it's so most in Loiza and Ibokua, right? If I pronounce it correctly. So we actually collected around like 300 data set with a lot of people, with 300 people, and we collected a lot of information related to their demographics. So this information is actually collected back in 2018 to 2019, when just after Hurricane Maria. So when so people are super like people actually, we asked people like a lot of questions, that is, did they apply for FEMA grant? Did they have enough? I mean, all the demographic questions, all about the FEMA grant, all about the socioeconomic conditions, everything we actually asked. And we actually, this is how we actually do. So we do like a 305 door-to-door surveys, and this is a 5 weeks of actually survey, and we actually hire 7 local research assistants, and we do like a uncontrolled quota sampling. So we just ask people, and we actually go door to door. So this data is actually collected collected by our fellow colleague Jessica Talbot, who already graduated from our group. But at that time, she actually went there and she collected these 305 data set actually there back in 2018 and 2019. So the location of this area is basically, I mean, the one we are actually showing. This is the location where we actually collected most of the data sets. So how do we do all the analysis? So we have, I told you, so the reconstruction parameter, meaning the reconstruction parameters are like the how we, so we actually recognize the term reconstruction initiation time. So what is reconstruction initiation time? So the time, people have different ways to respond, right? So whenever you have money, or whenever you have some kind of background, or whenever you have any kind of whenever after a disaster events, you need to know when you can start your reconstruction process, right? So if you have enough money, or if you have anything, then you can actually initiate your reconstruction process. So as a dependent variable, we actually try to see that is what are the reconstruction initiation time, which is an indicator of actually rebuilding. Meaning, this is how we actually trying to say, okay, when after the Hurricane Maria, when do you try to start your reconstruction process? Or after Hurricane Maria, how long did it take to start your reconstruction process? So these are the questions we typically ask, and we actually add another indicator, that is, have you applied for the FEMA individual grant? Have you applied for the FEMA housing grant? Do you have any other grant available? So this kind of information we ask to see if there is, we can see, or we can actually balance out any kind of information, meaning does it impact any of the reconstruction process after Hurricane Maria, or is there any kind of FEMA approval is actually impacting the reconstruction process, all that. So this is the thing. And for the independent variables, so we actually kind of said, what are the socioeconomic parameters? So meaning age, gender, whatever the demographic parameters are. I'll show it to you in the next slide. And what are the housing parameters? Housing parameters indicates actually, that is, do you have any property title? Do you have any kind of, do you have any house inspected by the inspector or an engineer? Do you have enough do you have the property title? Do you have the house inspected by the engineer or supervisor? Or do you have any insurance? This kind of information are actually the indicative for the housing parameters. So we run a linear binary logistic regression analysis. So what we see basically from the results, we actually, in the information, whatever information we have, we see like 60% of our actually population are female, and 59% of the respondents, they don't have any employed adults actually at home. And highest level of education is actually only 33% people actually went to the high school, and only 23% they have the bachelor's or higher. And the annual income is more than like 30%, they don't have any income. And one good thing we actually find, that is 60% of this sample is basically having 10,000 or less actually as their household income. So basically, if you compare to US have a median value of 62,000, while Puerto Rican has actually 33,000 per annum. And in our sample, we basically have actually kind of 10,000 which is way below that. Another thing is that in our in our sample, we have actually the mean age of 61 years, right? So basically, we are actually our sample is more representative to the older adults, meaning so 60 and above people. That is basically we are, whenever we are actually analyzing this, we are actually more talking about how the how we are talking about the most older adults and most I mean the and the and the aged people. So we are more, our analysis is actually kind of finding the viewpoints of I mean, or the thought processes of the older adults, what they are actually thinking. So that's the reflective one on this one. So on the results part, when we do the linear regression analysis or binary logistic regression analysis, we can see that reconstruction initiation time is basically kind of positively correlated with education. Meaning, if you are educated, you are more likely to do reconstruction. And another one we actually see, that is, whoever income level is below 10,000, I mean, they are not. I mean, we see a negative correlation in between them actually. So what we actually find, we run multiple analyses based on the the income value, and we don't see any kind of correlation until we go to a threshold, meaning, and which indicates that is you have a certain threshold value to understand that is how much income is actually impacting your reconstruction initiation time. And for the FEMA application, right, again, education is playing a very critical role. Whoever is the low income, if I say 10,000 is the kind of a threshold value, which actually is the telling you over 10,000 is a kind of, you know, they are high income, or below 10,000, we can say low income. So low income people basically, or low income households, I can say, they are more reluctant to apply. They are more applying to the FEMA application, but FEMA is only approving when it is actually they are having a property title on hand. So in our in media or any of the, whenever we saw like a lot of issues, like, or whenever we actually do some background analysis, what is actually the factors impacting mainly the FEMA approval process. So we actually see there are, we find out there are a lot of socioeconomic factors which might impact the FEMA decision process, right? But in our analysis, probably on that particular area, we don't see any kind of socioeconomic barriers or socioeconomic indicators are kind of impacting the FEMA approval process. But it's basically clear, like in this analysis, like if low income people are very much tend to apply for FEMA, but if they have only the education, and if they don't have the education, they are basically don't know, because FEMA application, if you guys are familiar, it's very much complicated. If you are applying for an individual assistant, that application is super complicated. So that it's our result actually kind of indicative that is, if we have the result, I mean, if we have that FEMA form, and if it is like complicated, people probably will not fill it correctly, and FEMA might deny it actually. So that's what is a kind of indicative process. I mean, indicative in our results as well. So what we see, we can see that is FEMA application is basically dependent on actually the education and income, and FEMA approval is basically depends on the title, right? And there is a rebuilding procedure, which is the reconstruction initiation time, which is basically depends on the okay, depends on the annual income and the education, right? So basically, if we make if we put everything in a common diagram, it's basically a cycle. Like your FEMA application will not be approved if you don't have a property title. Moreover, if you don't have the education, and then you cannot feel it, you cannot feel the you are not more likely to apply for FEMA, and your rebuilding process is basically being hampered also if you don't have the income and if you don't have the education. So basically, this is a cycle of vulnerability, meaning it's basically following one connection to another connection to another connection, and it's basically FEMA's individual assistance and FEMA's grant and all the socio-economic infrastructure is basically included on the rebuilding process or on any kind of reconstruction process. So so that's the main conclusion of this paper. But this is, I don't know how long I talk, but this is the conclusion of this paper. But if you have any more questions from there, I can answer it.